that's something we always talk about. Your best teachers or your best nutrition coaches are probably the people that were the most fucked up. For me personally, like even in my younger years, I told you I was diagnosed as hypothyroid. Well, if you have a sluggish thyroid, your thyroid does everything. It's your metabolism, your temperature, your sleep. Like it regulates everything. And so if you're hypothyroid, you tend to struggle with your weight. And so here I was, I was 18 years old, been athletic, done, played sports, went to Gold's Gym, 2 hours every day, was super fit, thought I was doing all the right things. And so I kept gaining weight, stuff got weird. Suddenly I was sleeping, 15, 16, 17 hours. And my parents were like, dude, like, what's going on?
Welcome to Barbell Shrugged. My name's Anders Varner. That's Doug Larson. Adam Von Rothfelder in the house. Colton on the cam in the back. Mr. Fitzby hooking us up with the freshest gear ever in the house today. We are at the Fitness Business Summit in San Diego, California. Laurie King from IN3 Nutrition, Director of Education. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You came all the way up from Texas?
Yeah, Austin, Texas.
Did you think when you got to San Diego it was going to be like freezing cold?
No.
You'd be out in the middle of this windstorm we have going on, rain in the morning?
Absolutely. So it's been like 89 in Austin for the record, like getting tan weather.
Right.
So this was a little bit of a...
I'm so sorry you had to come to San Diego.
Well, it looks like you're dressed for it. So.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well, Director of Education of IN3 Nutrition. We've had Mr. Phillips on the show multiple times.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So if you guys at home have not heard those, please go back and check them out. But you're the woman of the hour right now. What does Director of Education mean? What's going into that? And then give us a little bit of a background on where you came from and how you got into this nutrition game.
Sure. So I'll actually answer in reverse order. I have a degree in Nutrition Dietetics, so graduated from Illinois State back in 2013. Kind of bounced around, I'll be honest. Like I got to the tail end of getting my degree and actually thought about bailing and switching because you start interning at hospitals, working under dietitians where everybody's morbidly obese, and you're like, oh, okay, like 14 dietitians were prescribing meal plans that are making people more sick, not helping people get to their optimal health, just bouncing back from different things. And so I'd say, honestly, if I summarized every weekend of college, I was calling my parents crying, being like, what do I do? Like, I don't think this is the right thing. I don't see myself going with it. And parents were like, no, like, just get the piece of paper. Like, we'll figure it out. So I bounced around a little, did the full-time CrossFit coaching thing for quite a few years, gymnastics seminar staff, and then actually met Jason when I competed at the CrossFit Regionals in 2016. And so literally just got to chatting, and then he said, hey, like, you want to come out, teach a nutrition talk in Vegas? And, sure enough said yep. And so company kind of got going. And so as our company continued to grow, we're now up to 15 or 16 coaches. And so it's super important to make sure that our coaches are up to standards, that they're super well educated, continuing education, stuff like that. And so basically my role of Director of Education encompasses making sure our coaches are up to par. We teach a certification course where if people get into nutrition, they take our course, and then so, it's our job to basically make sure that the people that go through that course are, doing the right things, providing the right prescriptions. And so we've got a Facebook group for anybody that goes through a cert, and I'm the person that basically, they put up questions, we're able to answer them and just make sure that, people are getting well taken care of. So
very cool.
So certainly if you're hiring coaches, nutrition coaches, they already have some level of knowledge, and then it's your job to make sure that they continue down that path of education. So I would think that you wouldn't be giving them just the basics. They should probably have most of the basics handled when they show up to work with you guys. So what do you teach these people that already have a good background, good enough that you would actually want to hire them?
So it's interesting because, it's very similar, like we run a 2-day course. And so when you look at our actual course, day 1 is all science and then day 2 is application. And so different certification courses out there, they teach the science part, and the science part isn't hard, right? Like you can go on Google, you can Google intermittent fasting, you can Google ketogenic diets, but, day 2 is all about application for us. And so you have to learn how to take that information and then apply it to people. And so what I kind of realized as we got into things was, okay, there's tons of resources, but people still don't know how to apply it. And so something that I kind of capitalized for our coaches coming through the course was like, okay, we need more resources to keep learning and keep applying. And so through my own personal social media the past few months, I basically just started making a big resource so that, whether it's like, hey, I'm traveling, how do I hit my macros? Or, hey, tell me more about intermittent fasting. I've actually been creating that basically through our social media, and then it's stuff that, we put on our website's blog and, different email blasts and interfaces. So it's been really cool.
So when you do something like that, do you do more of like a long form first and then you kind of break it down? Or are you looking at, hey, I deliver this little bit of information and based off of the feedback and like your interest in this type of nutritional direction, then you expand on that?
Great question. So it goes both ways. So it's like you have to teach the basics, but then you want to get into the sexy stuff too. And so it's like if we go the direction of say hormones, it's like, okay, what does testosterone do in the body, or what does estrogen do in the body? But then what are the specific things you see, so you can get real sexy and talk about polycystic ovarian syndrome or other things out there. But so it really, I do a little bit of both. It would be my answer.
Awesome.
I like it when we can dig into kind of the male and you bring up testosterone. What are some of the big stuff you see? I assume you're living kind of in the CrossFit world. Where are guys falling short? Overtraining, I assume, is a pretty big one with you. And then on the female side of things, what comes across your table a lot?
Oh man, so it's funny because males almost have it a little bit easier. Like there's just less hormones to get messed up, and so definitely on the male side, the most common thing you see is low testosterone. We throw statistics around our certs all the time. That's like even if you look from when doctors are going to start suggesting like, hey, maybe you need to go, TRT therapy route or, something like that, you're looking at testosterone levels of 300. And, if you kind of look at your average people in the gym, you'd be surprised by how many people suffer with that. And so it's kind of sad, like how little awareness there is about the symptoms of low testosterone.
Yeah.
But I mean, the basic one would be, hey, like if you're a guy, when you wake up in the morning, you should have a morning wood, you should have a boner, like something should be going on there. But if you're really into training and suddenly you're not so much into having sex with your wife, like big red flags there, right?
Yeah.
On the female side, it gets a lot more complicated. Like there's just more hormones to mess up, and so especially as females age, they say maybe when we're 35 or younger, you might just have cortisol issues, or you might have thyroid issues. But we start hitting perimenopause at about 35. When our hormone levels start changing, and so suddenly you might be looking at they say it's something like progesterone levels drop by 65 to 75%, but estrogen levels only drop by 25%. So if you think about two hormones that work as a seesaw, you've got one that's slamming into the floor, and then you add in cortisol issues. Everybody's chronically stressed. You look at stuff like thyroid. Everybody's dieting, therefore everybody, our thyroid downregulates as we continue to diet. And so it's in females, like it's just more rampant. You see more hormone issues.
It seems like testosterone replacement therapy is becoming more and more accepted, is more and more common. It's sold more and more. It's a big industry now, and anyone that hears they have low testosterone, I feel like that's like the natural thing that people jump to these days. It's like, oh, you got low testosterone, I got this guy, he can hook you up. But that's probably not where people should start. Like what?
No. Like run the other way is the honest answer, right?
That's like the last thing to do, right? And
Yeah.
so what should people be doing naturally, like without injecting synthetic testosterone into themselves? Can they do to get back to a normal level?
So the biggest issue with conventional medicine, right? So conventional medicine says, hey, you're low in testosterone, take testosterone. Well, what they're injecting you with is not the same. So even if we look on the female side, say we've got somebody that's dipping into menopause, and so they're doing, they're taking a synthetic estrogen or taking a synthetic progesterone. They're not the same chemicals that you find in your body. And so like the analogy I always use is it'd be like if you were like, man, I really want ice cream tonight, and somebody brought you froyo, and you're like, all right, well, like that, I guess that does it, but like it's not really what I wanted. And that's exactly what happens in the body. it's just not the same thing. And so I would always say, like, that's the very last resort. Like, if life quality is dog shit, like, if you are so far down that hole, but, like, you need to get down to the root cause. It's not as simple as, I'm low in this, take this. You got to get down to the lifestyle stuff. And it really is the basics, right? Like when we look at any client or any nutrition client, the biggest thing we're looking at is like, hey, are you sleeping 8 hours a night? What is your caffeine intake like? Oh, you're drinking coffee all day long. Okay, maybe we need to take that stressor off the body.
Do you know what the research says about that, by the way? Like, do you have any examples of studies that have been done that show how caffeine affects testosterone levels?
Ooh, not off the top of my head. And so that's the funny thing, right? Like, getting into nutrition coaching, people are always asking, like, where's that come? Like, show me a case study. And it's like, I'm one of those people, like, I read everything I can get my paws on, right? So it's like, I might be able to cite stuff, but I couldn't tell you where it came from. But
Totally.
with caffeine, I don't have anything specific, to be perfectly honest.
That's
But
just a known thing. It's just commonly cited that caffeine does affect your testosterone levels. Is that like just a known,
I would say
generally
it
accepted
could
thing?
at severe levels, right? Because if we look at just, overstressing ourselves, it comes down to the basics, right? So it's called, don't live life like an asshole. So, like, again, are you getting enough sleep at night? How much caffeine are you consuming? How often are you training? How many days a week are you in the gym versus days that you're resting? It's getting back to the basics. And then, kind of back to the testosterone thing too. It's like, what's your food quality like? There's so many things in our environment that people forget about. And so I wrote something recently, and so I know, like, the picture had a shaker bottle, and so it was talking about, like, the one thing you need to remove from your life this instant. And people are like, oh, but my beloved shaker bottle. And it's like, dude, like, you don't realize, like plastics, parabens, and pesticides are, like, the big 3 Ps of, like, stuff you want to minimize as much as possible. So people don't realize, like, your conventional body washes and soaps and face washes and all that stuff, like, those are known chemicals that interact with your body and can impact those testosterone
No
levels.
more showers.
What
No
more?
Just
Don't
with
worry,
it.
I stopped months ago.
Yeah, I'm cool. I don't need that shit anymore.
What was the second thing you said there? You said plastics and something, and then
plastics, parabens, and then pesticides. So
okay,
obviously,
what is a paraben?
So paraben is basically going to be so all of those are basically xenoestrogens. So they're chemicals in your environment that basically act very similarly to estrogen. So if you've ever seen the guy at the beach that actually has man boobs, that is that's not due to physical hormone like that's due to like chemicals in your environment. If you want to think of it kind of like a bucket system, right? So you got this big bucket, you fill it up. Well, at some point the bucket's just overflowing, and what happens on the level inside your body is you've got a liver, you've got a GI, and all of that should be excreting the excess stuff. But say you've got a really, really high fat diet, you slow down your digestion. Well, rather than excess estrogen being excreted out of the body, well, it's being reabsorbed back in. So just tons of stuff there. But like parabens, you're looking at anything from, again, your skincare, your body wash, basically, and like cosmetics are horrific in this. So, and I think that's why, again, you might see a little bit more hormone problems in females is you're physically using more products. So I think if you look at the guy, it's like, okay, probably use like body wash, deodorant, and shampoo. Well, your female reversely is like, hey, I've got 10 different hair products. Put on my makeup, put on my self tanner, put on my perfume. So it's
self tanner for sure.
Shaving
sure.
cream.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you see when you're walking through the stores, you'll even see now things that say like no parabens, no, and it's interesting because like you'll even look at some of the nutritional world and how they even talk about these are in our foods and other estrogen forms other than Xeno, like phyto and all these other estrogen, prefixes that we can put on the front. Yeah, it's incredible. So when you're looking at someone, do you actually get your clients to do blood tests?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anytime, honestly, like the more data you can have, oftentimes the better. And so it's like you always want to start basic, right? Like let's not worry, chasing the rabbit hole of blood work if you're still like, hey, I eat McDonald's every day, But it's like if you hit a point where it's like you're eating healthy, you're doing all the right things, but like weight loss isn't happening or body composition's not on point, that's where it's like, okay, we need to get some blood work. Or even like I think with guys, if you want to talk about, it's like, man, I just don't have any energy, I'm feeling really run down and sleeping like shit. And that's when it's like, hey, dude, like, it's not expensive to go, get your total testosterone, free testosterone, get that scoped out. And again, it's never bad to rule out things if it's like, okay, well, you're already supplementing vitamin D, you're already supplementing B12, kind of just the main staples that would attribute to feelings like that. Like, if you're still feeling like crap and you're doing everything right, like, let's get some blood work on the table for sure.
What would you say would be like the average of somebody that's maybe at that level of like, hey, get rid of McDonald's, or you need blood work? Like people coming into IN3 and like having a nutritional education or coaching, whatever it is that they're looking for. Do you find that some of them are 50% are still, they have no clue, or is it where are you guys kind of at in the spectrum of the clients that you're dealing with?
So I think, like, we're super grateful for the fact that, like, mostly thus far anyway, like, we've mostly dealt with CrossFitters. And so I feel like we just have a little bit easier barrier to entry because most people do, they got into CrossFit. And so there was that focus on eating zone or paleo or, it's not uncommon, at this point to say, like, macros. And people are like, oh, yeah, I tracked my macros. A few years ago, people have been like, wait, what's a macro? Like, what language are you speaking, right?
Right.
So, like, I think even, it's not uncommon. I'd say maybe 1 in 10 clients already has blood work to provide where it's like, hey, I just saw my doctor, here's updated stuff for you. And so, like, again, that's always rad. But I would say, empirically when you're working with a client anyway, the first 3 to 4 months you're spending fixing all the lifestyle stuff. You're helping them find a better relationship with their job, their spouse, going to bed, whatever it is. And so I would say maybe, around the 4 to 6 mark, if it's like, you're doing all the right things and just, the pieces aren't adding up, that's when it's like, hey, maybe this is something, and I've had clients that never pulled blood work and it was fine. But again, it's like nobody hires a nutrition coach because they feel good. Like, they're coming to you because they feel like shit, or, there's a resolution that they're hoping to find. And so, if you're doing all the right things and it's just not adding up, blood work for sure.
Are you finding a lot of the stuff in the higher level athletes, or is this just the regular Joe coming in that just can't seem to lose that extra 10 pounds or to start feeling good in their day-to-day?
Man, I'd say both ways, right?
Yeah.
Because your people that are the higher level athletes, they're training themselves into the floor. They're doing way too much exercise, and they're probably again, they're probably not sleeping enough. They're under recovering because they're not eating enough carbohydrates. But reversely, I'd say honestly, you're probably seeing the low testosterone issue more in just your average Joes, or you think about most
fluorescent lights sitting in the cube all day is brutal. It kills people.
So either, and even especially as you start having kids and stuff, again, you're going through that phase where it's like, cool, just, wife just popping out a baby in the next 6 to 8 months. Like, what is sleep? Like, can I buy that, So.
I
wish I could.
Doug, can you buy sleep? Is that something you figured out?
Luckily, I sleep pretty damn well, even though I have 3 kids now. But for, like, my brother as an example, like, he had a kid where he was up all night, every night, and he would have paid any amount of money for more sleep. So if it was possible, I know people would do it.
Yeah.
Regarding coaching, you mentioned earlier for the 2-day seminar certification that you guys have, like the first half is kind of more physiology based, it's the tactics and whatnot of the science of good nutrition, and then the second day is more like the science of behavior change. It's psychology as an example. So what tactics do you guys have for implementing behavior change in clients? Because telling someone what to do and getting them to do it is radically different.
Totally. So our big kind of company phrase is that idea of leading from the front, right? And so I always tell people, like, coaching is not as simple as like, okay, here's your macros, like go eat 150 protein, 200 carb, 50 fat. Like, that doesn't mean anything to somebody. You've got to show them how to get there. And so it's, we teach how to create that prescription and how to generate it, but then how to apply it too. So again, if you're bringing in a client that's already, been doing macros for years, awesome. You can instantly go to them, say, hey, here's a set of numbers, be on your happy way. Most people, you might not start with macros. It might be like, hey, dude, so you're going to FaceTime me later, and we're going to clean out your pantry, and then we're going to clean out your fridge, and hey, go to the grocery store and FaceTime me, and we're going to go grocery shopping. And you're teaching somebody how to, meal plan and meal prep. And, then over time you could start layering in stuff where it's like, okay, we're shooting for 120 grams of protein. That means we need, this amount of ounces of meat, let's hit that. And then you're like, okay, this client, Connie knows how to get her protein. Cool. Like, let's give her a carbohydrate goal. And, so you can start to add layers to the cake. But, if it was your first day, like, you can just be like, here's some numbers, bye. Like, that's not coaching. Like, you have to physically show them how to hit that, but you've got to meet them where they're at. So again, if this is somebody that's eating out of vending machines and McDonald's all day long, like you're probably not starting with macros. Like we're talking about basic B nutrition.
Yeah, that's funny. I actually a client of mine, I actually will look in his garbage that he puts at at the base of a hill.
Yeah.
I open up his 2 garbage cans. I'll walk up there and I'll be like, who the hell's McDonald's bag was
Do
that?
a little trash bag.
and he's asking me why he doesn't have a 6-pack yet. And I'm like, oh, come on, man.
Actually, when we're going to take a little break, when we get back, we're going to find out what's in people's pantries because that is very exciting stuff to me. There's got to be some horror stories out there. So we'll be back.
Strong Coffee Company is a community built by people like you. People that take the time to educate and to apply all things that matter. Whether you're in the gym, the office, or at home, we want to help make you better. Introducing our full, rich, instant nutritional energy drink, the Cafe Latte. Visit strongcoffeecompany.com. Use BBS20 to receive 20% off today.
Welcome back to Barbell Shrugged. Laurie King is in the house.
Killing it.
At the Fitness Business Summit here. During the break, we're going to talk about people's pantries and the disaster that is, but during the break, you just hit a nasty round-off back handspring into a backflip. Where'd this gymnastics thing come from for you?
Yeah, so
I assume there was some you didn't just learn that. You were born with that, I don't think,
YouTube.
right?
Doug and I actually learned earlier
I was like,
today.
it's easy. Just land on your feet, tuck your knees, you're good.
Talk and go.
Yeah, no, so I was a competitive gymnast for 12 years.
Nice.
So I always make the joke, like, I can't do sports with balls. It's just me and gravity. That was kind of my jam. And so started gymnastics when I was 5, kind of did that until got into high school, and then it was like, wait, I just want to be like a normal person, I just want to have friends and get out of the grind of like, it was like I would get out of school, basically train like 5 to 9, go to bed, and then rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those like asshole teenagers that was like, I just want to be a normal kid, and then you're like, oh.
Except you could do round off back handspring.
Right.
Ballers.
So
Well, everybody else is playing with balls.
Yeah.
Party
Doing
tricks.
backflips. I mean, come
Party
on.
tricks are the jam.
Looks like you're a little ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
So.
So you mentioned earlier, you for a lot of your clients, you're hopping on the FaceTime. They're a disaster. What are we seeing in people's pantries leading to all these problems, and what are some of the kind of first steps you start working with people to just get them to understand general nutrition principles?
Ooh, so definitely in the pantry, it's just tons of processed foods, right? So I think you're
Delicious.
seeing you're seeing
Don't eat them, but they're delicious.
you're seeing your traditional, like Oreos, Twinkies, that sort of thing, and it's weird, right? We've got this diet culture where it's like, oh, I'm going to eat healthy. So maybe you see like the little 90-calorie, snack packs and this and that. So it's really just like, doing a full house sweep, because the honest answer, right, is like, it's in your house, you're going to eat it at some point, it's there, so it's going down. And so
Even if you don't want to eat it, you realize you shouldn't eat it. I think people rationalize, well, I paid for it and I want to waste the money.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
just because they don't want to waste the $2 on the chips or whatever, they'll eat the chip to feel good about the purchase.
Yep.
Which I think is insane. You already spent the money. Just throw it away.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, our supplements ain't different, though. It's like you invest like $50 in protein, you're like, man, this tastes like dog shit, but I'm going to drink it anyway, and you're choking it down. So, I mean, I
think I've got whey protein from like 2005 in my cabinet still.
I was in your pantry. You do.
Yeah, it's gross. I never finish that stuff. I'm like, well, I'm gonna try some whey. No. Well, we'd have to throw that out on
Did you
FaceTime.
ever buy like a 5-gallon bucket of weight gainer?
Yeah, back
like
in
in high
the-
school.
yeah.
I bought 2 of them one
It was
time.
literally you had to carry it.
Like
Like
my-
a handle. It was like a paint bucket.
Oh, yeah, like a paint bucket.
Yeah, totally.
Myoplex mass.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Boy.
Well, I bought way worse things than Myoplex
Oh,
mask,
yeah.
but I do remember Myoplex
That
mask.
shit ripped my
Myoplex.
gut in half.
Yeah.
You're like, oh.
That was the first. That was like the first. Like what was it? It was like meal replacement.
Yes.
Just have this.
They're the
Just-
ones that came out with the meal replacement.
Just
It was
as good as
insane.
food. No, it's not.
No.
I thought it was.
Yeah, me too.
Wash it down with some like hamburger helper. College. Killed it.
I remember one of the first proteins I ever like tried to dump into a glass of probably milk at the time, but like into a glass of liquid, and I tried to stir it. I tried to mix it. It was like I was pushing around a ping pong ball. Like, it was not mixing at all.
Good.
And then I was like, fuck it, I'll just drink it. And then it's coated. That whole outside is coated where it's like slimy on the outside, and then like you have to bite it, and then it just bursts into just powder in your mouth. And you just like stuck to all your teeth, and trying to like wash it off with the rest of the liquid.
Yeah. How does that little ball in there not get wet? Like just the outside, and then all of a sudden it's just like powder in your face.
We've come a long way since then.
It's called fillers. It was fillers.
Astronaut food.
Okay, so how do you take these people that they have Oreo cookies in their pantry? Like, they're coming to you for help, so they already have at some level they want to make a change.
Totally.
But still, even when you want to make a change is hard. Like, what do you do? Like, you say, fucking just throw everything away, and they say, I don't want to, and you say, fucking do it anyway, and they just do it? Like, how does it work?
Up on you. Eat them.
I mean, so it's a careful line, right? Because it's like intrinsically, like if somebody says like, "Hey, don't have insert the blank," you're like, "Oh, no, I didn't want it, but now I want it even more." But I think it just comes back to, again, like if the shit's in your house, it's gotta go. It's gonna get eaten at some point. So like if you can get people to just clear house on the pantry, clear house on the fridge, start with a clean slate, and then make sure you fill it with foods. I'll be honest, I've never really had kickback from people, or they're, again, they feel so shitty that they're grasping for straws, like they just want to get to feeling better. And so again, I've never really had people fight back on that sort of thing.
Have you gotten into any like the large transformations? Are you mainly dealing with people that are like looking for that extra 5% performance?
Oh man, so people probably hate this answer, but every coach specializes in something, right? Like you kind of find your niche of people that you work with, and so for me, like I really like the people that are kind of in that darkest place. So like I kind of end up with the people with the more severe problems of hormone issues or gut issues. My specialty actually for a long time was I was diagnosed as hypothyroid at 17 years old, and so that was my big population was the best coaching always comes from whatever it is you already have experience with. So, I guess a great example would be, like you've never been through pregnancy, so you probably wouldn't be as great of a coach for, coaching, somebody that's coming off of a pregnancy as, we have a coach on our team named Jess. She's awesome.
Yeah.
She just recently had a baby. So, if you're looking at the two, there's a very clear fit,
I could buy into that for sure.
Who would be the best. and so part of that is why, like when people come to IN3, they reach out for coaching, they actually have a call with Nicole. And so, basically Nicole, listens to a brief introduction, kind of ask some questions, put some feelers out, and then, basically connects you with the coach that would make the most logical fit. So again, anybody that comes in and they're like, hey, I'm hypothyroid, cool, we've got a coach, that's hypothyroid, she can take care of you.
So certainly if someone has Oreo cookies in their pantry, they were at the grocery store and they bought those and they took them home at some point. So even if someone doesn't want to have them in their house, next time they're at the grocery store, they might see them and be hungry in the moment and be like, fucking just throw it in their basket. Now they're back in the same situation that they were in before, calling you to like make them throw them away. Have you guys ever experimented with, especially with maybe the wealthier clients, like having someone do their grocery shopping for them? That way they don't have the temptation of the cookies to grab. Their assistant just has a list, or like a food delivery service where like they just select the items online, and then those are the only items that show up, and they're the pull to buy these things that look so tempting right at arm's length, they can just grab and put it into their cart. That temptation is now gone.
So I'd say it's twofold, right? Like obviously, again, like we just want clients to be compliant. So if they're willing to spend the money on, ready-made food services, like that's great. But like I think what we're always looking for nutrition coaching wise is like we want to find sustainability, and like that's not sustainable. Like if it's your birthday, like it gets back to why templated nutrition doesn't work. Like if it's your birthday, have the damn cake. Like not gonna find cake in a ready-made meal, from the company or stuff like that. And so I think that's where like macros in general just shine, because it's like we're more concerned about the proteins, the carbohydrates, the fats that are composing your meals. And certainly like you don't need to be eating Oreos or cake every day, but again if it's your birthday, you could easily fit that birthday cake in into that day and then keep cruising. So it's kind of finding that balance of like if it fits your macros versus like flexible dieting. And so if it fits your macros is often the extremes of like, oh sweet, well like I had a donut for, breakfast, and then I had, tacos for lunch, and, kind of, we're very focused on the food quality side, and I think that's something as a company we pride ourselves on is, like, we, hey, rather than buying $2 chuck and, really poor meat quality, like, invest, buy the grass-fed meat, the higher quality bison, buy the wild-caught fish, and so same thing. It's like, if somebody ultimately, like, I think where my mind instantly goes, like, ice cream, like, I would rather see a client eating Halo Top versus, other stuff out there, and so sometimes it's just finding, can we find the substitutions? But we talk about this in our mindset course, actually, is like, well, are you a abstainer or are you, a moderator? So can you have the food in your house? Can you have cookies? And, like, that's fine, and, they don't tempt you. Reversely, if you're an abstainer, like, the cookies aren't in the house, so your barrier to entry is, like, you have to physically get in your car, drive to the store, purchase them, drive back home before you can eat the cookies. Like, it's important to understand with clients, like, which person are you, so you can, best kind of navigate around that.
And what were those two types of people? The sustainers and the...
So it's abstainers or...
Abstainers.
Oh man, you're making me draw a blank. It's moderators or abstainers.
Got it.
So obviously, moderator being somebody that again, you can have it in your house. It's not tempting. Reversely, an abstainer would be like, no, we need to physically, just not buy it. Not have it in the house.
That's cool. So jumping back before you talked, dropped the word intermittent fasting in when you were talking about some of the, maybe some of like the hot words that are coming into you where people are showing interest. Have you seen has intermittent fasting becoming one of those, or the ketogenic diet? Like,
man.
Like,
you had to drop the
K-bomb.
Yeah.
Well, and it's not even so much the ketogenic diet, but as I think like as a nutritionist, you kind of are dealing with, not only their own behaviors, but this marketed biased behavior that's being approached to them.
Totally.
So then how do you circumvent what they think is right based off of marketing and what is right for them as an individual, and basically be like, yo, let's step back from like what you think and listen to what I know about you, or what you're telling me.
Totally. So, man, he had to go the keto route, because I want to pick on the keto.
Hey, man,
you talked about
I'm asking the hard questions.
Well, you talked about meat quality, and one thing that goes on in the ketogenic diet is like you have to have the high fat. Well, where's the highest fat going to be? It's not the 95.5 beef that you're buying. So like all of a sudden now you're looking at 70-30, and there's 35 grams of fat for every 4 ounces, and it's like, well, what side of the table are we on? Like where is there value in that, if there is any? Who are the people that are supposed to be in there, and like how do you battle that?
So I think, like, ultimately, right, like we wish everybody was rich. We wish that everybody could afford, to just shop at whole paycheck.
I wish you were rich, too.
But, I mean, like, you've got a level. Like, I think it's first understanding, again, like, where is your client at and what can they feasibly afford? So in an ideal world, yeah, everybody would be buying wild-caught seafood and shopping at Whole Foods, but, like, maybe you live in the bumfuck middle of nowhere and, like, you've got access to what you've got access to. So, I think, regardless, like when we're talking about, food quality and stuff like that, it all goes back to hormones, because again, if you think about an animal, whatever it's eating, you're consuming as well. So if you compare two cows and you've got a cow that's eating, like I remember headlines not too long ago, like a Skittles truck, flew over on the highway and dumped all its Skittles, and so those were actually supposed to be feed for cows, and you're like, oh, well, cows are supposed to eat grass. So I mean, if you've got a cow eating Skittles and you got a cow eating, grass, like which do you think is a little bit healthier animal? Same thing. Like you want to be behind the the highest quality meats that you can for yourself, certainly. But to kind of go back to your question, like, there's all these sexy marketing and gimmicks, and the thing is, like somebody invents an idea and then they ride it because you can make money off of it, right? Like, oh, I'm gonna come up with this crazy cool diet where you do this, and so you write your little ebook and you blow it up on the internet and then you disappear with your millions. We've got to get back to
hold the phone. You made it sound really easy. I have 3 ebooks, no millions.
You got to get on her channel. You got to get on her channel.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that later.
Off camera, we need the system.
Yeah, but so like we've got all these fancy gimmicks, and especially like I feel like social media has kind of made things worse because it's like, oh, just do keto and you'll have abs like this, and it's like, well, everything nutritionally works until it doesn't. It's like, yeah, maybe you get shredded doing some crazy and then diet, and then you see that person 8 months later, you're like, oh, what happened? I haven't seen you on the media lately, and then you're like, oh, got it. So I think we've just got to get back to like stop thinking there's a magical pill, there's not a magical answer. Like just do the right things, right? So it's like again, buy good quality meats, buy as high quality of produce as you can afford. Get everything. Stop the exclusion train. So something new is bad every week. I know Jason is always talking about like, oh, carbs are back. They're back in power. When did they ever leave? Carbs are just fine. Most people do play a glycolytic sport, whether it's CrossFit. If you're going to Orange Theory, you need carbohydrates to function, so therefore you should probably eat them if if that's your modality. Reversely, if you sit at a desk all day, you probably don't need tons of carbs. But same thing, people want to live the extremes. Like we need fats in our diet. Like cholesterol is literally a precursor for sex hormones. So you see your females that are like, yeah, past year I'm working with a company and I've been eating 35 grams of fat or 40 grams of fat, and you're like, so when was the last time you had a period? And they're like, it's been 2 or 3 years. And then sure enough, you start coaching with them, you introduce a little more healthy fats, some more avocado and olive oil, and that's damn, oh man, just had my first cycle in years. And you're like, wow. And all you had to do was stop excluding something from your diet. And so I think people get so caught up on fancy percentages, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm doing 40% this, 30% that. It's like the more and longer I coach, the more I'm just getting back to having somebody on a well-rounded diet. Where again, we talk a lot about periodization, and so especially if you've got athletes. We need to look at, there might be certain times where you're eating more carbohydrates, less fat, and then reversely, different times of the year you might be eating a little bit higher fat, lesser carbs. It all just goes back to individualization. And so, again, you can't go on Instagram, see a diet, and just instantly pull the trigger. Like, you got to do some work and make sure, like, does this actually line up? Does this work for me?
I think you just broke a lot of people's hearts. They're like, I can't. I'm not going to look like that guy. I mean, I don't know if you ever saw that thing where the guy was like, hey, I followed The Rock's diet for like 180 days, ate exactly what The Rock ate, and the guy gained like 8 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, he looked like he didn't gain any muscle. I mean, and he was like, I ate everything The Rock ate, on this plan. And it's like, well, that's a template that really didn't work for you then, I guess.
Yes, and I mean, like, that's the other thing too, right? Like, it's all order of operation. So it's great if you've got the nutrition down, but do you have the exercise component down?
Yeah.
And, I run into this all the time with people, and especially like females, it's hard because they'll be like, okay, like I want to gain muscle, and but I'm doing this in the gym, and so like as a coach, like it's weird, and you're here for nutrition coaching, and yet you're having to look at their exercise. You're having to see, does their exercise modality line up with the goals that they have and stuff like that. And so if your goal is aesthetics, like go bodybuild. Like unfortunately, like I love CrossFit, but like CrossFit does not equal potentially the body you want. Like if aesthetics is your ultimate end all be all goal, you need to go bodybuild.
Totally.
Reversely, if you want to go to the CrossFit Games, like stop worrying about your abs. Like that's the biggest conversation we have is like, hey, let's get on the podium. Like I'm gonna take away your abs, and we'll give them back later. But I've never seen that requirement of
give me your abs. Give me them.
I'll take them too.
Yeah.
Got extra. You have started to push your training a little bit more into the bodybuilding, a little bit more of a hybrid approach as well. Where did that transition come from, and how's it going so far?
Oh man, so the backstory was I competed at regionals, decided to make one last run for it, moved to a different city, switched gyms, like cashed all in on like, okay, we're gonna make it, back to regionals, compete one more time, really do the thing. And so I tore my shoulder a week after I moved to said new city. And so obviously had surgery, had a Bankart tear in the shoulder.
Is that one right there?
Yeah.
That's
So
a nice little battle scar.
yeah, so had surgery, and it was all just down to timing, right? So you're looking at it as like, okay, like CrossFit Open's rolling around, and I can still barely move a barbell. It's just not happening. And so I was gunning it so hard, to try and bounce back and try to be basically ready for the season, that what happened was probably about 3 or 4 months after surgery, I was going to the gym and it'd be like, man, I could black out under this barbell a little. Okay, like, whatever. And, then it just kind of progressively kept getting worse. And so what happened was, I went and got blood work done. And I was like, oh, adrenal fatigue. Like, and technically, the term we hear now is HbA axis. Or HbA axis dysfunction, excuse me. And so, it was basically just, I was doing all the right things. I was still sleeping, 8 hours. I was eating, 400, 500 grams of carbs a day, getting in, adequate calories. But I was just simply overtraining and, trying so hard to get back to what I was to be ready for the season that, sure enough, kind of slipped into the shit bucket. And so it's kind of like a coming to Jesus moment. Like,
That's
okay.
The shit bucket.
The shit bucket, that's a thing.
Sometimes you just slip and you land in the shit bucket.
And so, it was actually how I ended up in Austin, because I didn't know how to, it was like, okay, like clearly, if I'm going to the gym, I feel like I'm going to black out during workouts. Like, we need to take more rest days, we need to peel it back. And so I got into functional bodybuilding, and, like, to be honest, like, that was always the advice I gave to people. It's like, well, just, switch to a little more bodybuilding, or, check out other programs out there. And so the honest answer is, I tried it, and then, if you've ever done, like, sets of 10 on, like, back squat or deadlift, like, they get shitty. And,
Yeah, it's really hard.
and so same thing, it was just like, man, this isn't a good fit. And so I actually got linked up with Brian Borstein out of San Diego Athletics, and so kind of his specialty is basically just like, hey, I want to look really, really good and not hurt. And when you've been to that place, like, again, like, you're desperately trying to get out of that place. And so I've been working with him for probably about 7 months now, and so it's been really cool, because, like, I don't feel like shit at the gym, but I'm seeing, drastic changes in, body composition, stuff like that. And, like, the irony is, like, in CrossFit, that's what I was always chasing. Like, I just want to look good and, like, feel good about myself. And so, like, I didn't come from a space, competitive gymnastics. Like, I promise we weren't bicep curling, wasn't a priority. But it's been cool, it feels good to go to the gym. And I think the biggest thing I noticed was, my day for work used to end at whatever point I went to the gym. So it'd be like, okay, hit my training session, zombie brain, like, not getting anything done. And so that was, like, the biggest moment of clarity is, maybe about a month ago. It was like, wow, like, I'm taking client calls late at night. Like, I leave the gym feeling better. Yeah. And so it was like it was a transition, because, again, CrossFit, everything is go fast, go heavy, leave it all out there. And reversely, bodybuilding's like go super light, contract as much as possible, lots of tempo work. And so it's definitely it had a learning curve. But when I honestly look at it now, it's like, man, like, I've got the body composition I've been chasing for years. I feel good. I don't feel as beat up. So it's been cool.
Have you ever had an arm pump so massive that when you get back to the car and you reach for the steering wheel and you're just like, I should wait a minute. I'm not ready for this.
What do I do?
What do I do?
Should I move the seat up?
What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
So we
Dude, actually the worst one, have you ever gotten in your car and gone to hit the accelerator and your calf cramps?
Oh,
Dude, I've done that many times.
Stick shift, and I didn't understand how my foot wasn't working with the clutch, and I'm like, come on, man.
Can't push it in far enough.
So we had a running joke at my gym. There's a guy at a Streamline CrossFit, and he's always like, man, arm day again. And obviously coming off of shoulder surgery, like, you're not using your arms. They get a little soft, and my arms were kind of always like, my upper body was always like pride and joy. And so that was kind of a big priority when I spoke to Brian. I was like, hey dude, like, just want to get jacked, get shredded. And so I do arm stuff or shoulder stuff, 3 days a week.
That's great. You look great. Are you looking at competing soon? Is that?
Yeah.
So you're doing it for the love, or you're gonna do it for like you want to step on the stage?
So basically, it's funny, right? So when I hired Brian, our initial conversation was like, hey, so this is what I want to do. Like, I want to look really good. but make sure you still program gymnastics. Like, I really love gymnastics. And hey, Brian, like, can you make sure to program, like some Olympic lifting? Like, I don't want to lose that. And so, like, I remember, we had our call, and then I went home, and it was like, Laurie, what are we doing? Because, like, what you're asking for and what you actually need are now two different things, right? So it's your stereotypical nutrition client that says, like, oh, like, well, I want to get leaner and I want to get stronger. It's like, well, these are on two very different spectrums. What I was asking Brian to do is like, hey, man, I still want to CrossFit.
I still want to be a CrossFitter.
but I want to look good. And so we did, like, sure enough, I, like, slept on it and then, like, sent him a text and I was like, hey, I'm an asshole. Like, can we hop on the phone again? And so we kind of reframed it. It was like, hey, like, my goal is actually I do just want to look as good as possible. Whatever you need to do, program that. Ignore all the conversation we had yesterday. And so sure enough, kind of reframed the programming and stuff like that. But no, my focus right now is honestly, competing is great. Chasing that high that you feel when you're on that competition floor, like that's so cool. But like where my heart's at right now is just paying it forward to the nutrition community, because there's so much broken shit out there, and there's so many people that are writing templates from just the like different modalities and applying it to CrossFit where they don't belong, right? So like I think the biggest one I see is people are like, oh, it's a rest day, so I don't get any carbs. Well, like glycogen takes 24 to
you're still recovering.
Yeah, glycogen takes 24 to 36 hours to recover. So we take away all your carbs on your rest day, you're going to feel like shit when you go back to the gym the next day. Like, we can't do that, right? And so I'm really just cashing all in on the education side, and that's where my heart always was anyway. It was just, a little bit distracted by, shiny object syndrome. And again, competing is fun, but, like, at the end of the day, like, that's not what you're going to be remembered for, like, what's cool? Like, changing lives. And, if you have somebody that's 400 pounds and, you get them down to $150 and super healthy, like, cool, they can now keep up with their kids. We physically added years to their life. Like, that's cool. Like, hitting a barbell PR, like, that's cool too. But it's just priorities, and so priorities right now is just giving back to the nutrition community and just doing what I love.
Well, I mean, it's great that you had that experience,
Totally.
Because it's you learn more from your mistakes, right? Or you maybe not a mistake, but your experiences and within those injuries are some of the greatest learning moments.
Totally. And it's like I said earlier, like the best place of coaching comes from the one you've personally experienced. So you can give advice on how to bounce back from an injury, like, well, I lived there, I've lived the competitive lifestyle. So like, cool, like I've got one client right now that's sitting really high on the leaderboard, and you better believe, like, our nutrition the past year and a half, we've been able to hit that as well as we've hit it because it was a place that I came from. And so that's something we always talk about. Your best teachers or your best nutrition coaches are probably the people that were the most fucked up. For me personally, like, even in my younger years, I told you I was diagnosed as hypothyroid. Well, if you have a sluggish thyroid, your thyroid does everything. It's your metabolism, your temperature, your sleep. Like, it regulates everything. And so if you're hypothyroid, you tend to struggle with your weight. And so here I was, I was 18 years old, been athletic, done, played sports, went to Gold's Gym, 2 hours every day, was super fit, thought I was doing all the right things. And so I kept gaining weight, stuff got weird. Suddenly I was sleeping, 15, 16, 17 hours. And my parents were like, dude, like, what's going on? Like, you're missing school, because something's not adding up. And so with all my thyroid stuff, what happened was, like, through high school and college, I got really, really restricted about my eating. And so same thing, it's just I've got a little bit of experience in everything. And so that's why, we make a joke where it's like, any client you throw my way, like, it's no big deal. I've had my foot in a little bit of everything.
I have one more.
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line, or where is the line kind of drawn between a diet and a disorder, right? Where I think a lot of people in, like, today's fitness culture are a little disconnected from, like, health at sometimes. So, like, if a diet is restricting you from certain things that are affecting your hormones or whatever it is that now a disorder? And if it's so. Is this like something that you deal with, like disorders at times, eating disorders? Obviously overeating, undereating, whatever it is, binging, You know.
It's really just understanding like practice of scope, right? And so like I've even had my fair share of clients where like, initial reactions, you get into things and you're like, yeah, this is fine. And then you're like, uh-oh, kind of not looking so hot. And so our biggest thing is always like, you've got to understand, like, again, you have to source people out if they are falling into that land of disorder, or if it's just a little bit out of your scope. And so especially like what comes to mind is if you've got a client that's struggling with bulimia, that probably needs to be somebody that's working with a registered dietitian. Like, that's not someone that you as a nutrition coach or
Right.
Newly certified, like that's not in your scope.
That's good. Yeah.
Right on. Thanks for hanging out with us. Where can people find you?
So you can find me on Instagram, Laurie King _IN3. You can find us as a company, IN3 Nutrition. We teach certifications through the Nutritional Coaching Institute, but super big, like Instagram's probably my main one. I'm on Facebook as well, Laurie Christine King, but for sure Instagram's the way to go. That's where I'm blowing up the stuff.
Actually, I'll back you up on that. Your Instagram account is fucking totally awesome. There's a lot of really good content on there.
Yeah.
So if you are interested in learning from Instagram, go check out her account because there's all kinds of good information on it.
Mr. Strong Coffee, tell us about it.
About Strong Coffee.
I want to know.
Man, Strong Coffee is dropping very soon, and it's 100% instant nutritional coffee products that we're coming out with, and our first being a latte. It's very exciting. We have 15 grams of collagen protein, full spectrum. I thought you'd appreciate that. Yeah.
Hey.
5 grams of MCT, and then we load it with coconut water extract, some L-theanine, hyaluronic acid. It's great for your skin, nails, connective tissue.
Delicious.
It's absolutely delicious.
Why don't you
Dude,
throw the best
I was-
ingredient in there? It's called delicious.
Yeah, I know. I get stuck on the nerd.
Yeah, get out of the nerdy shit.
I know.
It's delicious.
I know. I get geeked out about the ingredients, but
I was pleasantly surprised at how fucking good it really is.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
It tastes very good and it mixes really, really well.
There's nothing
so
worse
it's
than
awesome.
a friend showing up with a product. You're like, dude, what if it sucks? I'm gonna have to tell him it's fucking delicious. Go drink
It's
this
good.
stuff.
yeah, man, I really appreciate it. It's been awesome, and I'm excited for people like Laurie to even see like if this is something that a nutritionist could use. I think that a lot of people in today's society, it's like Starbucks, and they don't even realize that they're drinking at 300, 400, 500 calories, and they're throwing everything out the window with the amount of sugar and everything that they're.
Yep.
So it's just long story short, drink some strong coffee and shut the fuck up.
What you produce is more of like a healthy breakfast option,
Totally.
kind of framed as coffee.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
our goal is I jokingly always say I want to make breakfast badass again.
Yeah.
Right. And because I think that breakfast has become a little bastardized, and we're kind of forgetting the overall semantics of the word, which is to break fast. Like, you haven't eaten. Now, what is the first thing that you're going to ingest? Let's make sure that it does the right things. Let's make sure you get the protein, you get the fats, you get some hydration. I mean, 76% of people in America are dehydrated.
Yeah.
They have mineral deficient water. So, I mean, we have minerals. We have potassium and magnesium inside of here. And it tastes delicious.
Yeah.
And it takes less than 3 seconds to make. I mean, hot or cold, which is cool. You can have an iced latte on the way, or a hot latte, and it's cold brew. I forgot to tell you guys that.
Love
I
it.
never told you that.
Boom.
Yeah.
At Von Rothfelder.
At Von Rothfelder on Instagram, or at Strong Coffee Company.
Mr.
Yeah.
Larson.
You can check me out on Instagram, Douglas E. Larson.
I'm at Anders Varner. Come and hang out. Shrug.shoulderfix.co. Physical therapy, strength training, get healthy, feel good, get back to training. Make sure you follow the show at Barbell Shrugged Podcast. Download us in iTunes. Leave a nice comment. Subscribe on YouTube. I think we got it all.
I think you said the
that was
things.
it.
You said
At
the
Anders
things.
Varner, at Barbell Shrugged Podcast. Be here every Wednesday. Coolest conversations in the strength and conditioning. Come hang out. Welcome to the Shrugged Collective Program Vault. Over the last 6 years, we've been leading the charge in online strength and conditioning programming and coaching. And for the first time in the history of the Shrugged Collective, we're combining our 11 best-selling long-term and short-term accessory programs into one membership site called the Program Vault. From Olympic weightlifting to strongman, leaning out, nutrition, you name it, our 11 best-selling programs are yours for $47 a month. Get to shruggedcollective.com/vault and you will find immediate access to our 11 best-selling strength and conditioning programs. Next on Barbell Shrugged, we're at Alliance MMA with Dominic Cruz, talking fight game.